And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Tuesday, March 25th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So, let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So, we are going to start off the show, talk a little bit about the NFL draft. We'll talk about Cam Ward's Pro Day. We'll talk about who is going to go number one overall. And it seems like it's going to be Cam Ward. And he feels like it's going to be him. So we will get into that in just a second. Then in the second part of the show, I'm going to talk about March Madness. But there's definitely been some complaints with the tournament and how there are individuals out there that believe this might be the worst tournament in a while. And we're going to kind of debunk that and say that's not true. But we will get into that in the second part of the show. We will also talk more about Aaron Rodgers and if he made a mistake leaving Green Bay, because now it's being reported that with his next team, he wants there to be a Green Bay-like culture, according to reports. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about baseball starting this week. I know it started last week, technically, but everybody else starts on Thursday. So some headlines, some injury news that I wanted to get into, and we'll preview the games on Thursday because pretty much all the pitching matchups are set. I think the Dodgers, I know, is still to be determined, but I think they have a starter on Thursday. We'll take a look at that in the fourth part of the show as well. And then in the final part of the show, continue my season overviews, and today we will be covering the Cincinnati Bengals. And then we'll take a look at what they've done in the offseason so far. I mean, really, they have gone all in to re-sign their guys, but we'll get into it. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about the NFL draft. So the NFL draft is about a month away, and it's really starting to ramp up because you're hearing all these different reports from different sources and, executives talking and coaches talking and things like that, and where, certain players can end up. Mock drafts, analysts doing mock drafts. So we really haven't talked about the NFL draft. Now, the main thing, and the thing that's going to start off the draft, is the number one overall pick. Who is going to end up going with the first pick? Now, we talked about this earlier in the offseason that maybe the Titans, who have the pick, could trade out. And you see one of these other teams like the Giants, the Browns potentially, maybe the Raiders, one of these teams potentially trades with them and gets that pick. Well, it doesn't seem like that's going to happen the way things are right now. And it could all be a smokescreen because earlier in the offseason you had the Titans saying that they intention is to take a generational talent. Now, your definition of generational might be different from their definition because maybe they feel that Cam Ward is generational. But when you think of generational, I mean, for me, I'm thinking of Abdul Carter, how people have him ranked. I'm thinking of Travis Hunter, what he brings to the table. That's what I'm thinking. And when you look at this quarterback class, everybody I talk to and everything you hear in general, this draft class is not generational. So now you're thinking, well, yeah, could the Titans trade out? But it seems like they could be dead set on taking a quarterback. Now, would I be surprised if they trade out or they don't take a quarterback? No, I wouldn't be surprised. But I think that's where they're leaning towards, if I were to guess. Because you got this new coaching staff. Now, they were in place last year too. They tried to get more out of Will Levis. And we talked about that a lot on the football podcast. They went out and they signed Calvin Ridley. They signed Tyler Boyd. They signed Tony Pollard. They drafted a left tackle. They did things to try and improve this offense and put Will Levis in a position where he was going to thrive in year 2, and that just did not happen. He was a turnover machine, and he was basically, unfortunately for him, he was basically a meme every week because there was always an image of him coming out of each game. So, yeah, that wasn't great for Will Levis. And then eventually, he got benched, then he gets put back in. It was the quarterback situation for the Titans was a mess last year. Because Mason Rudolph had to come in. Well, he got hurt, Will Levis, and then Mason Rudolph came in. But then there was that game against, who was it? The Bengals, I think. That was just a complete mess. Had to come in. But, yeah, they need a quarterback. And I think they want to hit the reset button. Callahan, I think, wants to have his own guy. So it could be Cam Ward. And Cam Ward recently had his pro day. And, the Titans, they had their scouts there. And it could end up being him. Now, he basically declared that, hey, I'm going to be the first pick. I think there's a quote in the article that I have. Yeah. So he basically said in an NFL Network interview, I said I'm solidifying it today. They know what they said. I made sure they heard me. And they top executives and coaches took him to dinner on Sunday. Now, obviously, that's regular procedure, I guess you could say, because teams do that with prospects. So I think the Giants also were in attendance. Actually, the Browns were not there. No Andrew Berry, no Kevin Stefanski. So that should tell you, maybe the Browns might not be taking a quarterback. And we've talked about that so much recently with some of the moves that have been made. Are the Browns going to take a quarterback? I mean, they could be taking Abdul Carter to pair with Myles Garrett. They could maybe even take Travis Hunter. You really don't know. But if the Browns sign a veteran quarterback, they are not going to draft one. Anthony in the chat, what is going on? He says, when you look at both the top 2 safeties in this year's draft, Malachi Starks and the one from South Carolina, who do you think is the better fit in Anthony Weaver's defense in Miami? I would have to go and look. Sorry I have to say that, because there's a ton of players that I am not too familiar with. So I would have to I'd have to go and take a look at that, and also see where their projections are, as well. But yeah, I mean, defense. I will say this though, when it comes to the Dolphins, defense is definitely an area where you suspect they are going to address, because they have the receivers. I mean, could they take another running back in the draft to back up Achane? They could, but you could find that later in the draft. Maybe offensive line, but obviously they're loaded at receiver. Tight end could be addressed, but Jonnu Smith had a good year last year. So he also says, I think Tennessee is going to trade down. I'm sticking to that. I don't think they'd like the quarterbacks as much as people think. They're just saying that to get a team who's more desperate to trade up. That is definitely a strong possibility. Because like I said before, everything could be a smokescreen. You got to have an open mind that things could be a smokescreen. And the Giants maybe trade up. Now, I'm hoping the Giants don't do that. I hope the Giants kind of sit where they are, see how the first 2 picks go, see how the rest of this free agency period goes, because if Russell Wilson ends up signing with the Browns are not taking a quarterback. So you could say, all right, well, if they take Abdul Carter, if they take Travis Hunter, we'll take a quarterback. I got to be honest, though, I kind of want Travis Hunter over a quarterback, and then take the risk of trying to get a younger quarterback in the later rounds. But I know a lot of Giant fans don't want to do that. So for me, I'd be okay with them taking Travis Hunter and then signing Russ, and then maybe you draft a quarterback in the later round. That's how I see it. Anthony says, if Tennessee stays there, I think they draft Travis Hunter. I mean, maybe, and then maybe they take a quarterback in the later rounds. I don't know. But I don't think they're going to go into next year with Will Levis as their starter. Now, they could go in and bring somebody else in. Well, they did bring in Brandon Allen, and he knows Callahan's system. He started last year for the 49ers, that one game against the Packers, but they're not going to go in next year with Brandon Allen. Unless maybe they do and they just figure, all right, we're just going to punt on this season and tank. And because the following year the QB class is loaded. So we'll see what happens. And then also, we're hearing things with Deion Sanders and how, he wants his son to ultimately end up in New York. And you know what? I would be okay with Shedeur Sanders. I would be okay with Cam Ward. And we've talked about Shedeur Sanders a lot in our production meetings and how he could definitely handle New York. And listen, I would be all for it. If they draft him, I don't think it'd be as egregious as taking Daniel Jones with the number 6 overall pick back in 2019. But I do think that Shedeur Sanders can sit. You have Jameis start, or if you bring in another quarterback, they start. Well, I mean, if they draft Shedeur Sanders, to me, that means they probably didn't bring in another quarterback. Because you have Tommy DeVito, you got Jameis, you have Jameis start, the beginning of the year, and then you transition to Shedeur Sanders. Ideally, in a perfect world, that's how you see it, but with the way the Giants have been, you never know. Anthony also in the chat says, the Patriots are trading Joe Milton apparently. How about Tennessee trading for Milton? Maybe that is also a possibility. That is also a possibility. I think they're looking for like a second or a third round pick for Milton. Even if I'm the Giants, I would do that. Maybe. But that could definitely happen. He also said, I'm still thinking Sanders goes to the Raiders, not New York. It's possible. It's possible. I think if he slips out of the top 3, which I don't think is going to happen, I do think the Raiders, they could jump on that opportunity to try and get him. Unless, they say, we're going to wait till next year and they continue to add to their offense because they definitely need more. But we'll see. But let me know what you guys think. Who do you think goes first overall? Do you think that it will be Cam Ward, or do you think that something crazy is going to happen that we don't see coming? The Titans straight out? Let me know in the comments. So we are going to take our first break. And then when we come back, we'll talk about March Madness. We'll talk about some fans being disappointed with the tournament so far. So we'll get into that when we return from our first break of the show. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows where 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast, and for the second part of the show, we are now going to talk about March Madness. We'll talk about the tournament and how there are some people that are, I guess, disappointed with how it's been so far because there hasn't been any Cinderella stories in this tournament. And some people, I guess, are claiming that this could be like one of the worst March Madness tournaments. And Look, I think the first round, I would say there wasn't like a ton of like crazy games, but the round of 32 was pretty good. You had a lot of crazy finishes. And, some people are saying the lack of buzzer beaters. Yeah, I guess, that's true. But you did have the game with Colorado State and Maryland. Maryland hit the game-winning shot at the end. So you had that. But you did have you did have some really good games in the round of 32. And let's go back and take a look. So, round of 32 started on Saturday, right? So, I thought Arkansas St. John's was a pretty good game. I mean, Arkansas kind of pulled away at the end, but that was still a relatively competitive game throughout. And Arkansas pulled off the upset. They're a 10 seed, and now they're playing in the Sweet 16. Creighton and Auburn was entertaining. Auburn kind of pulled away late. Creighton, and you got to remember, Creighton was leading before the half. The BYU-Wisconsin game was crazy at the end. That was a 6 upsetting a 3. I think Wisconsin had the ball to take and had the opportunity to take the last shot. Yeah. And, well, actually, I don't even think, did they even get a shot off? There was a game where they didn't even get a shot off and they turned the ball over. But I don't know if it was this one or it was a different game. But, yeah, BYU won by 2 points. Houston-Gonzaga was pretty competitive towards the end there. Houston was leading big for a while, and then Gonzaga, was making a late comeback. And I think, yeah, you get down to the final, few minutes. Yeah, it was a 2-point game at one point. But Houston came away with the win there. You go to Sunday's games. The Florida-UConn game. The two-time defending champions against one of the number 1 seeds. That was a pretty entertaining game. UConn played a very good game, but, Florida won because Florida's a better team. And it ended up being a 2-point contest. And they came away with the win. That was an entertaining game. We talked about Maryland. The Oregon-Arizona game, that got dicey at the end. Caleb Love, though, had a very good game. And then, Michigan State, New Mexico was pretty good as well. But I don't really like this notion that this is like one of the worst March Madness tournaments of all time because we're not getting any. We don't have a Cinderella team right now. Well, when's the last time a Cinderella team won the national championship? For the most part, when you have these Cinderella teams, like you have these St. Peter's or, teams like that. Well, McNeese was able to advance at least one round. But for the most part, these teams don't go very far. Maybe they go for a round or two, right? They get to the Sweet 16, and then that's it. Then they get knocked out by a better team. And that's what a lot of people are saying. You have the best teams in these final, rounds here. And that's going to set us up for some really good games. You're not going to see blowouts. And that doesn't necessarily mean that if there was a Cinderella team that it would be a blowout. But and there could be blowouts anyways. But you're going to get some really good basketball games down the stretch here in this tournament. You're getting the best of the best. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, there's a lot of people that point to NIL and the transfer portal and how, a lot of these guys from these lesser schools will go to these bigger schools and, they're hurting the little guy. And I understand that. I get that. And it's happening all over college athletics. College football, it's happening as well. But that's just how it is. I don't know if that's necessarily going to ruin college basketball. College basketball is very popular. My friends are more into it than I am. But, I really only watch. I mean, I have put on, some of the big SEC games. I was watching the Big East tournament with St. John's. I did watch some of those games. And obviously I watched Quinnipiac in the conference tournament because, I was hoping maybe they could squeak in. But that's besides the point. College basketball is very popular, and I don't think that's going to go away. Now, it's going to hurt the other schools, the lesser schools, but the schools like you see in this in the graphic here, Florida and UConn, it's not going to hurt them. And March Madness is not going to be affected by this, in my opinion. This is a tournament that people are going to continue to watch every single year. And I think as long as the product is good, it doesn't matter what teams move on. If the games are good, if they're exciting, and you get these exciting finishes, it doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter. But I understand why there are some complaints. Look, I don't think the first round was the greatest, but we've gotten some good games, and we are going to get some really good games as we move along into the tournament. So I think it's just people finding things to complain about, because that's what people do. They just complain. Any little thing that dissatisfies them. I mean, look at the last 2 years. Who won the championship? The best team won the last 2 years. There was no Cinderella team that went on this run. And if we're going to say this about March Madness, why don't we say this about, some of the other sports as well? Let's talk about, not that this is really a great comparison. Let's talk about the NFL. When's the last time a Cinderella NFL team won the Super Bowl? Let's see. Let's go back the last 5 years. So you had the Eagles. Were they a Cinderella team? No. The Chiefs? No. The Bucks? I mean, I guess you could say, well, Tom Brady went to the Bucks and they won, well, also you could say Matthew Stafford going to the Rams. But yeah, they weren't Cinderella teams. And then the Chiefs before that. I mean, they won their first championship in a long time, but I wouldn't consider them a Cinderella team. The Patriots. I mean, what about, I think the Eagles, when they won with Nick Foles, is a Cinderella story because Carson Wentz got hurt and then, Nick Foles comes in and he starts the final few games of the regular season, and then they go into the postseason and they go on this magical run with him as the quarterback. But I don't think that was a Cinderella team because that was the number 1 seed. I would say you'd have to go back to, could you say the Ravens when they won with Flacco? Or even, the Giants definitely. Ravens, you could, because Flacco played really well in those playoffs. But I don't know. I feel like since then we really haven't seen a Cinderella story or a Cinderella team go on this magical run in the playoffs and win the Super Bowl. That hasn't happened recently. And then the NBA, you look at the teams that have won. The Celtics, they were the best team last year. You had the Nuggets, the Bucks, the Warriors. The Lakers won in the bubble. I don't know what you would call that. That was just an odd year, but yeah, it's just. I think it again. I just think it's just a way for people to complain. Now, I understand it's a problem for the lesser schools, but it's just I think for the fans, as long as the games are good and they're exciting, I don't think it matters to them. I mean, that's really what I care about, is just the games are good. But I don't know. Maybe I'm dense on this subject. Sorry if I went off on a tangent with the past champions, but in the major sports leagues. But yeah, I don't know. I don't like the argument. I think this tournament is incomplete. Let's see how it finishes out. But I think to say that it could be one of the worst I think is lunacy. Because again, we got some really good games over the weekend. Really exciting finishes. But that's what I think. Let me know what you guys think, though. Are you disappointed with the tournament? I think the tournament's been solid, and it's only going to be better with the later rounds coming up. You got the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 this weekend. So before we go to break, just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate, get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to this show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So when we come back from our next break, we will continue to talk about Aaron Rodgers, some recent reports on what he desires in his next team, and we'll talk about whether or not he should have stayed in Green Bay. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast, and for the third part of the show, we will once again be talking about Aaron Rodgers. Now, there were some recent reports that came out, and they were saying that with his next team, if he does continue to play, that Rodgers wants a Green Bay-like culture. Now, odds are he's going to go to the Steelers. And, you know, the Steelers, I think, do have a good culture. I know at times you thought the culture was tainted because of some of the things that went on. You know, you go back to when Ben Roethlisberger was still playing, and you had the Le'Veon Bell stuff, and, you know, the Antonio Brown stuff especially. I mean, there's a lot going on in Pittsburgh. And you can also, point to the other players as well over the years. But I do think, it doesn't get completely out of hand. And I think, I know things have happened with George Pickens, but I feel like there's not as much drama with the Steelers as opposed to the late 2010s. Now, if I am wrong on that, and you're a Steelers fan and you're listening to this or watching this, let me know. But that is supposedly what Aaron Rodgers wants. And that got me thinking, because, sometimes, we have trouble coming up with things. Should I talk about, or I wanted to talk about, should Aaron Rodgers have stayed in Green Bay then? Now, I would say, I think he did make the right decision to leave Green Bay, but I think he made the wrong decision in terms of where he wanted to go. Because, now, a lot of us maybe thought he was going to go to the Jets, and this team with a very good defense, Got some good young players on offense. Offensive Rookie of the Year, a young running back. You thought that you bring over this guy, and you thought bringing him over was going to be the missing piece. However, the Jets did not have a culture when Rodgers came over. Now, Rodgers tried to make it into his culture, you could say, because, he bring in Nathaniel Hackett, Alan Lazard, you signed to that big contract. You bring in Randall Cobb. He's bringing in his guys. Now, I don't think the guys that he brought in were the best. And I've said when I've hosted these shows that I like Randall Cobb a lot. Randall Cobb was a solid player in the NFL. But at that point in Randall Cobb's career, he's good for the locker room. But for the Jets, they needed guys that were going to really impact this team. Not just off the field, but on the field. And Randall Cobb is not a game breaker. Same thing with Alan Lazard. Now, Lazard was better when Rodgers actually played, but he was a disaster in the first year because Rodgers got hurt and you had Zach Wilson throwing the football. And Lazard was basically a non-player. But then Rodgers, started and Lazard, looked better. But apparently, now I wanted to see okay. So, yeah, like I said, Rodgers wants a Green Bay-like culture. But, so Aaron Rodgers is searching for a team that has a culture such as the one the Green Bay Packers have, according to Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer. So, there could be mystery teams out there that we don't know about, but right now it just looks like the Steelers could be that team, and things went well between the two sides. But, yeah, so I do think Rodgers, I guess, made the right decision to leave Green Bay. It's just where he ended up going. Because I've brought this up numerous times. When you take a look at the other quarterbacks, the other big-name quarterbacks that will also be going into Canton, some of them before him, some of them already have gone to Canton and are in Canton. But we look at Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford. I went in the order in which these moves happened. They went to teams that had stability in some ways. The Rams with Sean McVay, team that was making the playoffs pretty much every year. And they felt like Matthew Stafford was the missing piece, and he ended up being the missing piece. And now they're going to try and go and win another Super Bowl. Peyton Manning with the Broncos, they made the playoffs the previous season. John Fox was a good coach, and they made the playoffs every single year. Peyton was the head coach. Peyton was the quarterback. But then they moved over to Gary Kubiak, and the offense changed, and coaching staff changed. They won the Super Bowl with Peyton, despite Peyton not playing well at all, really. But yeah, with John Fox, Peyton had that record-breaking season. And then Tom Brady, could you say the Bucs had stability? Bruce Arians was there. Bruce Arians is a good head coach. He got a Cardinals team to a championship game. I believe he was on the coaching staff with the Steelers when they won, the Super Bowl with Big Ben. But he was also with the Colts, and everything that was going on with Chuck Pagano. I think he stepped in as the head coach with Andrew Luck. Bruce Arians is a good football coach, and Brady came in with all that talent, and he brought in his guys. He recruited better than Aaron Rodgers did because he brought in Leonard Fournette, brought in Gronk, Antonio Brown, and they won the Super Bowl. And they beat Aaron Rodgers to get to the Super Bowl, which don't get me started on that. But I guess you could say Tom Brady brought the stability to the Buccaneers, particularly when it comes to the quarterback position. But when it comes to the Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, it wasn't a good fit. Because again, I've said this. What has Robert Saleh done as a head coach? As a defensive coordinator, he could coach defense, but the Jets could not get out of their own way when it came to the offense. And it's not just Saleh's fault. You could also say it's Joe Douglas's fault because The reason why the Jets got Aaron Rodgers is because of Zach Wilson not being able to function as a starting quarterback. And you could say that Zach Wilson wasn't ready. Maybe if Zach Wilson ended up elsewhere, got to sit behind a starter for a while, maybe, he could have been better. I mean, now he's going to be backing up Tua, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's just, you know what? It was time for a change. It was time for a change with Rodgers and the Packers. Now, I put up an image of him as a Green Bay Packer because that's who he is. We're not going to remember him as a Jet. And wherever else he goes. If he goes to Pittsburgh, he plays there for 1 year, they go to the playoffs, they get knocked out in the first round. Yeah, that's going to be that's going to be part of his career, but everybody's always going to look back at his time with the Packers. His prime years, 4-time MVP, Super Bowl champion. You're always going to look at his resume with the Packers, and you're pretty much going to discount everything he did with the Jets and the Steelers. Now, some people might hold it against him and say, yeah, his legacy is tarnished. There's people that I work with, not with GSMC, but with my other obligations, that, they say, oh, yeah, this season with the Jets ruined his legacy, might ruin his chances of getting to the Hall of Fame. What? Are you kidding me? Come on now. It's ridiculous. Now, it was a Jet fan saying that, but that is just a ridiculous take. Aaron Rodgers' legacy has been cemented. Okay? He's getting into the Hall of Fame. He's walking, he's floating into Canton. So that was ridiculous. But look, things just got sour in Green Bay, and I think Green Bay was just getting tired of just, having to deal with the drama. Because, it was like, is he going to play? Is he not going to play? What's going on? And, at 2022, that was it. Him and Randall Cobb, they walked off the field together, and you had the feeling that, he was not going to be back. You thought that in 2021, you thought that in 2020, but 2022, yeah. And then he got traded. And, it just didn't work out. It didn't work out with the Jets. I was hoping it would, but it didn't. And now when he takes the field, next year, hopefully, well, I know some people are hoping he just retires. How is he going to be? How is he going to perform with potentially another new team? We'll see. But, let's say he did stay in Green Bay. I think there was a lot going on that final year. I know some people say he didn't play great. But you also got to remember, he was playing hurt. I don't want to make excuses, but got hurt in the London game against the Giants. You also had a ton of new receivers that you had to work with. I shouldn't say a ton, but you had a few rookie receivers. You had Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, stepping in because Devontae Adams got traded to the Raiders. There was a lot going on. And despite all of that, they still ended up almost making the playoffs. Now, the fact that they lost to the Lions, that final game in Lambeau, you're like, wow. I remember 2014, they played against each other, and that was for the division. And you're like, there's no way the Packers are losing this game. Rodgers is playing on a hurt calf, and they won that. Rodgers actually left the game, came back in, they won. And you're like, oh, they should be able to beat the Lions. No. Well, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say, because the Lions were not a pushover in 2022. And well, in the beginning of the year they were, but then they finished the year strong. You knew it was going to be a tough game, but you had a feeling like this is a trip to the playoffs, Lambeau Field, the Packers and Lions. Rodgers should be able to get this done. At least squeak into the playoffs. And that didn't happen. And who knows if he's ever going to make the playoffs again. If he continues to play. But We'll see what happens. But if he stayed in Green Bay, I mean, then it's like, well, you're going to have to trade Jordan Love because Jordan Love is like, his contract is going to be up soon. And then you have no backup plan. So, yeah, I don't know. It would have been interesting to see how that would have played out, but it didn't. So, really, what I'm trying to say is I think Rodgers just made a mistake on where he wanted to go. But, you know what? Let me know what you guys think about that in the comments. So, we are going to take our next break now. And then when we come back, we will talk about baseball starting this week. A couple of things I wanted to touch upon. Mookie Betts and Gunnar Henderson landing on the IL. We'll take a look at some other headlines around the league as well. But yeah, I'm excited. I renewed my T-Mobile subscription for MLB because it's T-Mobile Tuesday. So yeah, going to be locked in for baseball starting on Thursday. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the fourth part of the show, we are now going to talk about Major League Baseball. So here we are. We are a couple days away from the start of the season. We had that technically last week. I know I keep saying that a million times. But now everybody starts on Thursday. And I did want to double check because I do remember I did say that. Because I know the Dodgers, I think we're the only team that didn't have a pitcher listed when I was looking at the MLB app. So, yeah, everything gets started around 3:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Yankees and the Brewers, they get us started. Then the Orioles and the Blue Jays, first pitch is a couple minutes after that. Then you got a lot of games in the 4 o'clock window, Eastern Time. So Blake Snell. So 7:10 p.m. Eastern Time, Tigers and the Dodgers. Blake Snell will be the opening day starter for the Dodgers. So you got Blake Snell against the Cy Young from last year, Tarek Skubal. So yeah, some good pitching matchups coming up on Thursday. Looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it. I need baseball, and I know a lot of people that probably watch this show might not necessarily be interested in baseball like I am, but I'm excited. I'm excited, even though obviously with the team I root for, there's a lot going on, but it should be it's gonna be good. It's gonna be good until we get to July and I'm like, yeah, let's get to football season now, please. But there was a couple of other things I wanted to get to. So Gunnar Henderson of the Orioles, he's going to be on the IL with a intercostal strain, which he suffered on February 27th. Now, it should be a minimal stay on the IL. Now they're hoping he comes back quick. It's not a substantial amount of time. But, that is a big loss for the Orioles early on. And, for the Orioles, I think there's going to be some regression with them this year, particularly because of the pitching staff. I could be wrong on that. I think the lineup is still very good. I mean, they did lose Santander in the offseason. I think that's a big bat that, it's going to be a little hard to replace because, it's a switch hitter. It's a lot of home runs. But you lose him. But, yeah, you still got Gunnar Henderson. You got a ton of young, up-and-coming players. Like Adley Rushman, of course. Jackson Holliday, who was up in the bigs last year. So, yeah. But you don't want to see him being out. And last year, had a very good season, 37 home runs, 21 stolen bases, played very good defense, was an all-star last year. So, yeah, hopefully they get him back. Jackson Holliday could be the one that moves to shortstop. Ramon Arias could take over second base duties as well. But, yeah, I'd say that's a loss that you don't want to have early on in the season. But, again, hopefully it's not that long and he comes back from it. Now, the other thing is Mookie Betts. So Mookie Betts is dealing with a bit of an illness. And he's dealt with some weight loss. He's gone from 175 to 150. And they don't really know when he's going to come back. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be out like the whole year, but they don't know at one point when he's going to be back. Now, I think he probably misses opening day the way things are going, but he is showing signs of improvement. So hopefully he's able to get over this. But yeah, he's been dealing with nausea and the inability to keep solid food down. So that's not good. So hopefully he gets over this, and it's some kind of bug, I guess, that he has, and hopefully that he gets past this. Because he's a very important part of the Dodgers, and also, he's a great player to watch, and also just from a human standpoint, you don't want to, see someone dealing with this, because it's kind of scary too, because you hope it's nothing, too serious, but like I said, showing signs of improvement, and hopefully, he gets over this and he's back on the field sooner rather than later. And like I said, the Dodgers will be taking on the Tigers on Thursday. But yeah, I'm really, really excited. Also, Shohei Ohtani, he's resumed his throwing program or his pitching program. So at some point, we are going to see him back on the pitcher's mound, and that is going to be something to really pay attention to because he didn't pitch at all last year. Also, I did want to bring up a move that the Yankees made. So they did finalize a deal to sign former Dodger and Ray, left-handed pitcher Ryan Yarbrough. Now, I like this move because, well, the Yankees are dealing with a lot of injuries, but also he's kind of like a swing guy where he could start for you, but you could also have him in the bullpen. And the Yankees, they really only have one lefty in the bullpen, and that's Tim Hill. So, and you look at the way the Yankees rotation is set up right now, there's a lot of guys you look at in this. I mean, they got Carlos Carrasco and Will Warren are going to be on this team. And, because Clark Schmidt's on the IL, Luis Gil is on the IL, Garrett Cole's out for the year. Luis Gil is going to be out for several months. Clark Schmidt, you hope, is, back in, after, I guess, one or two goes through the rotation. But Yarbrough, he could come in, he could start, 3 or 4 innings. He can come in after, someone gives you 4 innings and, you bring him in, like I said, as that guy that can come in, be the swing guy, pitch, those middle innings, and then you have, your late bullpen guys, depending on if you're winning or not. So I actually do like that move a lot, and that's a guy that's given the Yankees a lot of problems in the past, so happy he's on their side. But, yeah, that was another minor thing that I wanted to bring up as well. But, nothing, I think there really hasn't been any. Well, actually, Shane McClanahan ended up leaving his spring training start. The Rays left-handed pitcher. And, he's one of the better pitchers in baseball. Obviously missed last year. Tommy John surgery. Yeah, ends up getting hurt. Something happened in the third inning. Left triceps. So, yeah, I mean, it's frustrating. Because this has happened to so many players where, you come back from being out for so long with injuries, you finally make it back, and now you get hurt again. And, if the Rays are going to do anything this year, he's going to be a part of that. But now he's going to be out. And like I said, we don't know exactly when he's going to be back. So hopefully he's back soon. But again, it's uncertain as to where he's going to end up. Actually, we did have a trade recently as well. So I think it was the Guardians. They acquired Nolan Jones from the Rockies. So yeah, they acquired Nolan Jones from the Colorado Rockies in exchange for utility guy Tyler Freeman. So he actually was a top prospect for the Guardians, and they traded him back. In 2023, he hit 297, 20 home runs, and a 931 OPS. So they're hoping that he can come in and be a big bat in their lineup, a lefty bat. So yeah, that was a trade that did happen. They also gave Tanner Bybee a contract extension, a 5-year contract for at least $48 million with a club option for 2030. He's 26 years old. Alejandro Kirk of the Blue Jays, he also got a extension of 5 years, $58 million. So the Blue Jays did agree to a contract extension, just not with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. So that happened. So yeah, just a couple of notes there. The Braves signed Alex Verdugo to a 1-year, a $1.5 million contract. Bringing him in. They're still waiting for Ronald Acuna to come back. He's going to probably be back, in May, June, around that time. But yeah, Verdugo was a free agent for so long. I mean, and a lot of people are saying, you have him and Anthony Rizzo who are playing in the World Series, and they weren't on a team. And so the Braves bring him in on a 1-year deal. But yeah, everything starts on Thursday. Joe Buck will actually be doing the play-by-play on Thursday for Yankees Brewers, so that'll be interesting. I know Yankee fans are thrilled. I mean, I'm indifferent on it. And I actually, to be honest, and I think I've said this before, I actually do miss Joe Buck doing baseball. I do miss it, and it's really really weird to say, because when I was younger, every time the game was on Fox, I would just be like, oh, great. You got to hear Joe Buck calling the Yankee games, because I was one of those fans that just said he was biased against the Yankees and against New York teams. But the thing is, when Joe Buck is calling a game, it's a big game. It's a big game. And at some point, him and Troy Aikman will be doing the Super Bowl again with ESPN, right? Because I got to be honest, I do miss when they would be doing the Super Bowl as well. But, so he'll be calling the game on Thursday. It's going to be weird not, having it on the Yankees network, the S network, because it's always been on the S network. That's never changed. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. The COVID season, I remember it was on ESPN. But it'll be even stranger when you go back and you listen to the radio broadcast and you realize that John Sterling is not doing the play-by-play for radio. So yeah, that's gonna be weird. A whole year of no John Sterling. But it is what it is. Times are changing. But so that's just some notes from around baseball. It starts on Thursday. I will do predictions for tomorrow. We will predict, who's going to win the divisions, and maybe we'll do a World Series prediction. I don't know if I want to go that far. But, we'll talk more baseball tomorrow. We'll talk baseball on Thursday. We'll preview the games, the pitching matchups. So it'll be an exciting time next couple days here. So we are going to take our final break of the show now. And then when we come back, we will talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll talk about their season and what they've done in the offseason so far. So with that being said, for one final time today, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And we are back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are now going to talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. Season overview on the Bengals and their season. And they were definitely one of the... I don't know why this keeps happening. Well, I do it to myself. It's my fault. Mic keeps falling. The Bengals, right before that, my mic fell again. Were one of the more disappointing teams in the NFL. Joe Burrow coming back healthy off of the wrist injury. You know, you thought this was going to be a big year for them. You know, they were going to show everyone that they are one of the top teams in the AFC. But that ended up not being the case. They finished 9-8 once again and missed the playoffs. Now, the reason for that is because, well, first of all, it was not because of their offense. You look at where their offense ranked. The Bengals offensive rankings, 9th in total yards per game. They averaged 365.5 yards per game. Excuse me, I don't know what's going on there. I'm running out of gas here. So they were 6th in points scored per game. But yeah, 9th in yards per game. Yeah, that was really strange. I apologize for that. Running out of breath here. But 9th in total yards per game, 6th in points per game. They averaged 27.8 points per game. And yeah, their running game was not great. They ranked 30th in rushing yards per game. But, I mean, they were top 10 in basically everything else. Passing offense, passing yards per game, they were first. But yeah, it's amazing the comparison between the passing yards and the rushing yards. Because yeah, rushing yards, they were 30th. They averaged 92.6 rushing yards per game. But that doesn't mean that like their running backs were bad. Now, they did bring in Zach Moss, and you did also have Chase Brown. Now, Zach Moss ended up getting hurt, missed the rest of the year. But Chase Brown stepped in, and, you know, he was very good as a receiver. And, yeah, no, did run the football effectively at times as well. But, yeah, they were not a very good running team. But the Bengals, I mean, when you look at their offense, they're throwing it constantly. Their total offensive yards, they had almost 6,000 yards of total offense. Total passing yards, Joe Burrow had almost 5,000 yards passing. You know, had the Bengals made the playoffs, he would have been an MVP candidate. But, the reason why the Bengals didn't make the playoffs, the real reason why, is because of their defense. Total yards allowed per game, their defense was 25th in the league. They gave up an average of 348 yards per game. 25th in points allowed per game. They gave up an average of 25.5. Passing yards allowed per game, 21st. Rushing yards allowed per game, 19th. Sacks, they were 24th. Now, they did have the NFL sacks leader in Trey Hendrickson, but that was really it. And then they were actually 8th in interceptions. All right, so you're top 10 in interceptions. But yeah, the Bengals' defense is why they did not make the postseason. And also, they did get off to a slow start, which is what they do every year. But this was a year where they couldn't afford to do it. They got off to an 0-3 start. Now, the first game that they lost was the first game of the year. And you could say that was not on the Bengals' defense. You know who that was on? That was on their offense. So I'll give you that. They lost to the Patriots 16-10. Joe Burrow only had 164 yards passing in the game. And also, leading into it, we didn't know if Jamar Chase was going to play because, with the contract situation, was he going to hold out? But he did end up playing, and the Patriots, they came away with the win. Really, the game-changing play was Kyle Duggar knocking out the fumble. We did talk about that from the Patriots' perspective. But yeah, Tanner Hudson was going in for a touchdown. Kyle Duggar knocked it out. And, that was kind of the difference in the game. But yeah, the Bengals only put up 10 points. Then they played the Chiefs in Arrowhead. And they had an opportunity to win that game. They did. But Joe Burrow, that costly fumble that led to a touchdown. And then you also had, on the 4th down and long play, Mahomes throws it up. It gets knocked away, but there was a pass interference on the play. So that puts the Chiefs in field goal range. Butker kicks a game-winning field goal. They lose that. And then this game, week 3, this was the Commanders coming out party, in my opinion. Jane Daniels was efficient in that game. I don't think there was any punts in the game. Yeah, their offense just had their way with the Bengals defense. But yeah, Joe Burrow had over 300 yards passing. He had 3 touchdowns. Chase had a big day. They got T. Higgins back for this contest, but they still ended up losing. Now, they did win against the former Bengals quarterback in Andy Dalton the following week, the Carolina Panthers. So they got to 1-3. And, they had the opportunity to beat the Ravens. The first meeting between the two teams. You're up 10 in the fourth quarter, and you end up losing that lead. Burrow ended up fumbling, and that led to a Justin Tucker game-tying field goal. And then, I think McPherson missed a field goal in overtime, and the Ravens ended up winning. But then they won against the Giants on Sunday night. They won against the Browns. So at that point, they were 3-4, and then you thought, okay, this is when they're going to start going on a run here. But then they lost to the Eagles. Eagles beat up on them. How many yards did Saquon have in the game? Saquon had over 100 yards. Yeah, they ran the ball for over 160 yards in the game. Burrow got picked off. And yeah, they ended up losing by 3 scores there. But then they beat the Raiders. And then you had that epic Thursday night game with Jamar Chase, scoring 3 touchdowns. Both quarterbacks played really well. Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, they both had 4 touchdown passes. But yeah, Chase had 264 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. They went for 2 at the end because, if they went into overtime, if the Ravens got the ball, they were going to lose. And they didn't get it. But the Bengals, they were up by 2 scores in this game. They were up 21-7 in the third quarter, and then they just didn't score again. The Ravens, they ended up scoring 21 unanswered points. So, you could kind of blame the Ravens offense there, but still. And then, they got off to a slow start against the Chargers. They did come back, but the Chargers ended up getting the win. Burrow had 356 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no picks. Chase had 2 touchdowns. He had 75 yards receiving. T. Higgins had 148 yards receiving and a touchdown. But yeah, they ended up losing that. So they were 4-7. Come out of the bye week, and the Steelers put up 44 points against them. Now, one of them was a turnover that led to a defensive touchdown. But yeah, it just was not looking good for the Bengals at that point. Russell Wilson had 400 yards of passing in the game, 3 touchdowns. Yeah, it looked like it was really the end at that point. But the Bengals then ended up winning 5 straight games. They beat the Cowboys on Monday night. They beat Cooper Rush, really. They beat up on Will Levis and the Titans. They beat the Browns. They beat the Broncos in overtime. That was a very good game. And then they beat the Steelers in the final game of the regular season to go 9-8. But, they needed help from other teams, and they didn't get it. and they ended up missing out on the playoffs. So too little, too late there. Had they won against the Patriots, they would have made the playoffs, but they did not. But like I said, Joe Burrow, a very good season, fell just short of 5,000 yards passing, 43 touchdowns to 9 picks. Had the Bengals made the playoffs and finished with a little bit of a better record, he would have won the MVP. Chase Brown, Bengals weren't a great running team, but, he fell short of 1,000 yards. He had 7 rushing touchdowns, and he also had 4 receiving touchdowns. He did get hurt, though. I think it was the game against the Broncos he got hurt. But, yeah, no, they got to pair someone else up with him. He's going into year 3 already. He took a big step forward for the Bengals last year. He's a good playmaker for them. But Jamar Chase, what a year he had. Triple crown in receptions, receiving yards, touchdowns, 127 receptions on the season, 1,700 yards receiving, and 17 touchdowns. T. Higgins, despite missing some time, he had 10 touchdowns. He had 911 receiving yards. Mike Gesicki was productive for them at tight end, 665 yards passing, a couple of touchdowns. Yoshi Voss, their third receiver, he had 6 receptions, or 6 touchdowns on the year. But yeah, no, the Bengals offense was very good. One of the best in the league. Fell short of the playoffs. And, we take a look at their offseason. They paid Jamar Chase. They paid T. Higgins. We talked about that. They also paid Mike Gesicki. So, they brought their guys back. They brought back Joseph Osai. They brought back B.J. Hill. But, they signed T.J. Slayton, another defensive tackle. They actually brought back Samaje Perine. Actually, I forgot about that. They did bring back Perine. I feel like running back could be something they address at some point in the draft, maybe. But I think really they should go all defense. They brought in Oren Burks from the Eagles on a 2-year deal. So I guess that was a good pickup for them. But no, needle movers for the defense. So now, when we look at where they are picking in the draft. So they are currently picking at, I think, 18, if I'm not mistaken. 17. So they got the 17th overall pick. They got the 49th overall pick in the second round, 81st pick in the third round, the 119th pick in the fourth, 153 in the fifth, and then 193 in the sixth. But yeah, I think they should go, most of their picks should be defense. And this is the thing for the Bengals, if they can fix that defense, and the other thing too is they got to make sure that they figure things out with Trey Hendrickson. If they could re-sign him, make sure he's on the team for next year, and you could fix this defense, and this defense could be just average, and you don't get off to these slow starts, this team will be back in the playoffs again. Burrow stayed healthy. Chase was healthy. T. Higgins is going to miss time. That happens. But if you could keep this team, you keep the offense healthy, and the defense could be just average, they will be back in the playoffs. And looking at Tankathon, they have Mikael Williams from Georgia, an edge rusher, going to the Bengals. So we'll see what happens. But they got to go all defense, in my opinion. And we'll see if they end up doing that. But that is the Bengals season. They went 9-8. I think they will be a team that can 100% bounce back. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure to check out all the other shows as well on the network. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to all the videos, YouTube channels. And also, if you want to listen to us, you go to Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You just type in GSMC and, whatever podcast you are looking up. If you want to look up my podcast, other podcasts, they are on there as well, wherever you get your podcasts. So, yeah, that is pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. And as always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, signing off from the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.